right, because I mean, I've got a friend who does a lot of business plans and he writes books and things like this. He is able to spend, he was actually quite comfortable um, in his own company and still having contact with people, but on a limited basis. Now, you take an extrovert who's in a very people-orientated environment and they're having to work from home, they are going to actually suffer a lot.
Mm.
So when we talk about people actually adapting, I mean, I think it was Charles Darwin who said it's not the strongest or the smartest who will survive, it's the one who can adapt to change the quickest. Or I think Charles Darwin was credited with that, but I'm not sure whether he actually did say it. There was no, because I did research it, and
But what you're saying
there's
is we're all going to be left as a world of Asperger's autistic people, and most of those will be typing out algorithms which control our lives even more tightly.
that's what they do today. If you look at big tech, I mean, if you look at the people who actually run big tech, you got Mark Zuckerberg, who is socially inept. Who's the guy from Twitter? I can't remember his name because I'm not on Twitter, but he looks to be a board, quite introverted. So when you look at all these people who are running big tech at the moment, they are all, most of them are quite happy sitting down writing algorithms and things like this.
Well, that's exactly the
Um,
problem, you see, and you know, you and I have met lots of these people. Some of them are more affable than others. Some of them have a better temperament than others. But the trouble is that they don't see the nuance of the grey area in between. They're very black and white, and this is how our lives are going to be run increasingly from now on, and in fact, in ways that we don't recognize already. We did touch on the issue of social credits and the fact that in China it's already happening. They use facial recognition technology in China to racially identify people and pop them into re-education centers. And here they're thinking of doing exactly the same thing,
mm.
starting off with facial recognition and vaccine status.
Yeah, I mean, because I mean the thing is when we talk about mental health, for example, in particular, and how people have actually suffered, we talk about the high levels of cortisol that goes through your body, which is, for those who don't, well, most people would know what cortisol is, but it's actually a very high, it's a negative stress hormone in effect. And so when you actually have that running through your body, it just lingers a lot longer than something like dopamine does. So dopamine's actually that very quick fix that people actually get, but it's only a short-term thing. It's why people who actually take sort of recreational drugs will have to keep on topping it up and actually having more and more to get the same reaction. Whereas with cortisol, that just lingers in your system so much longer. Hence the reason it leads to so much depression and anxiety and things like this. But we were also talking about obesity as well. One of the things cortisol also does is actually creates an insulin spike. And the more insulin and the more insulin spikes you actually produce, the more weight you actually put on. So even if people are probably eating a healthier diet, which I don't think they are because they as well, because there's also a combination of using companies like Uber Eats to actually have food delivered to you because you can't be asked to cook because you are more depressed and things like this. So you resort to the easy fix of Uber Eats and things like that. And when you actually compile all that together along with the stress, the amount of insulin spikes you actually get is what actually puts on all this extra weight that people are experiencing right now.
And it reverses healthy hormones like growth hormone and testosterone. So you end up massively building up fat reserves in the body and cutting down on muscle. And indeed, 2/3 of the UK population are now clinically obese, and obesity is more important, is worse for cardiovascular health than smoking. And guess what? The number one risk factor for corona is cardiovascular health. And in fact, 70% of the Western world, if you test them on the Kraft test, come up as pre-diabetic. Then what are the government doing? Okay. Lockdowns, and okay, now they've allowed people to start going to the gym and all this stuff. But for months, we've been kept in the worst possible health situation, making us even more vulnerable to this supposed predator that's amongst us.
Yeah, it's. I mean, there's a lot of double standards and hypocrisy that has come around. I mean, the thing is, even now, you can't go out to. You can only 6 of you, I think, or 2 households can mix by going to the pub. Yet there was 71 people in my gym on, over the last few days. And there wasn't really much social distancing, as you can imagine, because of people are waiting to go onto machines and things like
Of
that.
course not.
There was a level of courtesy, I suppose,
Awareness.
Political correctness, more like.
but no, it was courtesy. It's courtesy because the thing is, you've also got to respect other people's feelings as well. So you allow them their space, but there wasn't that much. As I said, in terms of social distancing or wearing masks in between things, because it wasn't really having a huge effect. I mean, I wore the mask the first day, for example, but when you're moving from machine to machine, to put it on and take it off and put it on and take it off wasn't really
No, in fact, it's
pragmatic.
exceptionally bad for you. It's going to ruin your health wearing masks. We know that. The research has been done. And I bet in the gym you are busy chatting and shaking hands and backslapping and the occasional hug. If you go to playgrounds now, there are hardly any masks, and all the parents are there sitting, chatting, shaking hands. The kids, dribbling over each other and having a good time. There hasn't been a swathe of deaths skiving through, parents and their kids, has there? Of course not.
So I mean, the thing is, in terms of the mental health that people have actually gone through, for example, how can they actually reverse that, having got into that state? I mean, what is the solution for some of these people? Because I think the hardest hit are probably people in their 50s, more so. I mean, the thing is, when you actually look at sort of the younger generation, they're probably quite comfortable on video games and things like this, where they can spend hours and hours entertaining themselves on their own. Whereas people in their 50s, particularly the extroverts, which is, I think they've been the most vulnerable group in terms of jobs, finances, purpose for their future, I suppose, and all these things, they've probably been affected the hardest. Plus, they're also at that cusp where they're actually vulnerable or not, so that they've got that worry on them as well.
Well, that's right. And in fact, just before the pandemic, GPs had just started prescribing socialization groups to the elderly, because that's the importance to mental and physical health of socializing. And that has been cut from underneath the feet of the nation, so that those people who've been getting on with it have been trying to be fit. Those people getting on with it have, first of all, stopped listening to the news, because they've realized the news is absolutely nonsense. They do the minimum they can to stick to within the limits of the law, because unfortunately, in this case, specifically for corona, the law is mostly nonsense, to the extent that well-known professionals and licensed professionals have quite clearly stated what they think of it, including professors who won Nobel Prizes, and indeed they've just been cut and sanctioned by the media and by social media, so they don't have a voice. But you have to stay in contact with your friends, and that's one of the purposes of our podcast. We enjoy communicating with each other, and we have our sense of belonging, topical talkology, and it does us good. Our oxytocin goes up, our blood pressure drops, our mood improves, because anything that's natural, nature has designed to be good for us, and anything that is unnatural is bad for us.
Yeah, do you know what I found? I mean, I think I saw it the other day. Actually, was the fact that in terms of where the Tories are in the polls, because as I said, I haven't been really that impressed with Boris Johnson and the government in terms of handling this, and having been a Tory most of my life, I saw some poll results, and apparently the Tories are actually even more popular now than they were, and I wonder it's because you've got the likes of Keir Starmer who actually haven't really shown, as I said, which is the worst of two evils, and when you actually look at someone like Keir Starmer, who actually comes across as quite professional in his in on the surface, has actually proven to be just as weak, if not weaker.
Well, if I can add to that point, I've also voted Tory all my life, and as I saw Boris Johnson going from Mayor of London, being what I call a happy-go-lucky puppeteer or jester, to then becoming the Prime Minister, I think for me, and this will sound strange, but I think you'll understand what I mean, the coronavirus, in terms of these extraordinary powers that have been given or pushed through due to the government majority in the UK, is a present for Boris Johnson, because he couldn't lead himself out of a paper bag. So actually the coronavirus powers and rules have made him become a leader as such. But what I find absolutely amazing, and we look at the prioritization, or a leader needs to prioritize. At the moment in Northern Ireland, there have been, for the last 10 days or 2 weeks, there have been fires, there have been cars turned upside down, there's been a lot of unrest because of Brexit, because of the Northern Irish Protocol. Yet the Prime Minister is thinking about going to India, flying over to India. We're not sure why, but then again, he hasn't been to Northern Ireland yet, which could really, if it carries on, get a lot worse very quickly. But that has not been mentioned by the media. He hasn't gone there to visit and sort it out as a leader. Yet we are going on about coronavirus and these restrictions daily, hourly, as usual. But they're on our doorstep. This is part of the United Kingdom. He is the Prime Minister, and he's doing nothing about it.
Yeah,
and it could get really, really, problematic. As remember, the 70s and 80s, we don't want to go back to those days again.
But isn't that because isn't that because you've got sort of former IRA and IRA sympathizers in a way, looking to take advantage of the situation by stirring something and turning it into a crisis, and they're just taking advantage of the timing to be able to do so and resurrect the IRA, because as we know, the IRA pretty much died after 9/11 in effect.
Yes, but you're talking about the why. I'm talking about the what. Why is it happening? Probably, yes. What is he doing about it? Absolutely sod all. And if he carries on, it's going to get a lot worse very, very quickly.
Yeah, and I said, this is where politicians have very double standards. I mean, we're also seeing it in the US at the moment, because there's a huge crisis, a huge crisis on the border over there. So they're not so they're worried about coronavirus and actually. And putting all these restrictions on them over there, yeah, they're letting people in the tens of thousands without any proper testing, and then they're just driving them in buses and dumping them off in some park in the middle of Arizona in some small town of about 2,000 people. Which is why some of the mayors over there have called a state of emergency. So
yeah, but if you look at Biden as a leader, before he became the president of the United States, he was very anti-Putin, and he is the evil, whatever, menacing, bad person of the world. Really being quite vocal about how he was anti-Putin, and now he wants to meet Putin and have a little discussion or a forum or whatever it is. So that we can have there's a diplomatic way out of this. And then at the same time, he's giving out a message saying, but however, if he carries on like this and we prove that he's trying to sort of infiltrate himself in our elections and in the running of our democracy, then I will not hesitate. So, sorry, what are you saying? What are you saying?
I mean,
you're
the
giving
thing is,
somebody like Putin a lovely platform to so that he can go back to his people and say, thank you, look at this, look how powerful I am. Look how respected I am by the states. They fear me. I'm mentioned in the news every single day. He loves it. He's lapping it up.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing about this whole COVID thing and everything as well. It's almost giving people a reason to actually have power struggles now and sort of change the power dynamics of global politics. And the thing is, I mean, most people were willing to challenge Biden than they were Trump, if you actually think, because Trump used to put his foot down. So it's almost like he didn't want to poke the bear in that respect because he
he
would
was
do that.
unpredictable. Exactly.
He was
unpredictable.
unpredictable.
But
Whereas,
if you look at the restrictions, sorry, Andy, if you look at, I find quite ironic is we